We have a growing colorectal cancer problem across the world. It is the leading cause of cancer-related death in men under the age of 50 worldwide. And it is the third most commonly diagnosed cancer. It's the second most common cause of cancer-related deaths across the board worldwide. Since the 1990s, there has been a dramatic rise in the incidence of colorectal cancer in people under the age of 50. We call that early incidence colorectal cancer. And scientific research is now unraveling the intimate relationship between the microbiome and this cancer. And that's what we will be discussing in today's video. I'm Dr. Katrina Coulter. I'm an infectious disease physician, and I make educational health videos specifically with a focus on the microbiome. Just a reminder that everything we talk about is for health information purposes only and not to be taken as medical advice. You should always talk to your healthcare provider if you have any medical questions. Let's get into this. So what is cancer exactly anyway? We tend to think of it as one thing, but it's not one thing and it doesn't have one cause. So breast cancer is not the same as lung cancer, and that's not the same as colorectal cancer. In general, cancer is a cell that is growing uncontrollably. Cells are programmed to have a certain lifespan and perform a specific role. And after they perform that role and they live out their lifespan, they're supposed to die. All cells also are supposed to be good neighbors and respect boundaries and stay within their defined area. A cancer cell grows out of control, it doesn't die, and it doesn't respect boundaries. It goes everywhere. But the cause of that in different types of cells may be different. Today, we're going to talk about colorectal cell cancer, which are going to be cancer of the colon or the large intestine and the rectum. This will not include the esophagus, the stomach, or the small intestine. So the incidence in people over the age of 50 has been relatively stable, but since the 1990s, we've been seeing this rise in incidence in people under the age of 50. And it's suspected that this is actually something that probably started in the 1980s and then accumulated over time. And while we have suspected the microbiome to be playing a role in many different types of cancers, we have a lot of evidence of its relationship to colorectal cancer. And this makes sense because the microbiome has direct interaction with the epithelial lining of the large intestine and the rectum. So these bacteria and fungi are right there next to these cells that develop cancer. So colorectal cancer starts as a polyp, and then it grows into an adenoma, and then if it continues to grow, it becomes a malignant tumor. How does the microbiome affect this? It's important for you to understand that we have not identified a specific type of bacteria or fungi that causes colorectal cancer. In gastric cancer of the stomach, we have identified a specific bacteria that can cause cancer. It's called H. pylori, and we can test for that. That is not the case in colorectal cancer. Instead, we have identified a group of pathogenic bacteria that seem to play a role in inducing the development of cancer, whether it's inducing the polyp or causing it to progress to the adenoma or eventually to a malignant neoplasm. And there's a few different mechanisms in which this occurs. March is Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month, and so this is a great time for us all to be thinking about this, and especially if you're under 50, I really want you to know that this directly affects you. So we've identified these pathogenic bacteria that seem to be present, and we've actually identified certain bacteria when someone has the cancer that seem to be proliferating and causing some specific factors. And we've also found that the way or the effectiveness of chemotherapy or immunotherapy on the cancer is determined by what type of bacteria are making up your microbiome. And one of the ways that we know this is because we found that if you receive antibiotics while you're receiving the chemotherapy, that certain chemotherapies are not as effective. And this is because of the direct effect antibiotics have on the bacteria in your microbiome. So just another reason why we really want to minimize antibiotics unless we've determined that they're absolutely necessary. There are three main mechanisms by which these bacteria and the microbiome as a whole is inducing or promoting cancer. The first is by direct DNA damage to the cells. Certain pathogenic bacteria, such as certain types of E. coli, Enterobacter fecalis, Bacteroides fragilis, have the ability to bind directly to the intestinal epithelial cell and cause cell damage to the DNA that then promotes this tumor growth. We've also found that bacteria can produce what we call virulence factors, or I think of them as their weapons, that can then bind to the cells and cause the cells to divide in a way that results in lots of mutations, and those mutations can then promote tumorigenesis or tumor growth. In addition, some of these weapons that the bacteria can produce can actually affect the tight junctions between the epithelial cells. And this is what prevents things from crossing into the bloodstream. And if you have a lot of big particles that are not supposed to be crossing through these tight junctions, trying to cross over, then this induces inflammation. And chronic inflammation is bad. That is not what we want, and this can further promote tumor growth. If you followed along with any of my other videos, you know that I talk about this wall as being like a brick wall with the tight junctions being the mortar between the wall. And there are actually certain types of bacteria that can kind of maintain the wall or act as the brick masons. I encourage you, if you have not seen those videos, to check them out to help further understand what we're discussing in today's video. The next thing that the microbiome can do is it can actually modulate the immune system. What does this mean? It means it turns the immune system up or turns it down inappropriately. So a nicely functioning immune system, in addition to looking for foreign invaders, is actually looking for cells that are acting abnormal or irregular, cells that are not dying when they're supposed to die, or they're growing outside their boundaries. And it takes these cells out of circulation. It says, this is not how you are supposed to be behaving. You are causing a problem. We will remove you. Certain pathogenic bacteria can actually inhibit the immune system's ability to survey for cancer and remove these cells. And so these cells go undetected, they fly under the radar, and they keep growing out of control until they become a cancer. The other thing that it can do is turn up the inflammation when it's inappropriate. Some bacteria cause a chronic low-level infection at the level of the intestinal epithelial cell, and this causes a chronic inflammation, and the repair mechanism can mess up and create instead a cell that is growing out of control. And then the third mechanism that we've defined in which colorectal cancer can be caused by the microbiome or promoted by the microbiome is some of the byproducts that these bacteria make. So these are not the weapons, these are actually what the bacteria process in our intestines. And one in particular is called a bile acid. Our liver makes a bile acid, and then it is recirculated in the intestine to a secondary bile acid by bacteria. And this does many different processes in the body. One of them is it recycles hormones. It determines how much hormone is recycled versus dumped in the stool. So a very specific bile acid, deoxycholic acid, has been associated with colorectal cancer. So we're finding higher levels of deoxycholic acid in people that have colorectal cancer. This deoxycholic acid also increases the reactive oxygen species, which causes local tissue damage, and again, the opportunity for cancer growth, as well as increased inflammation. This specific bile acid, deoxycholic acid, also can block signaling for the pathway that would induce the cell to die when it's supposed to. So instead of dying as it's supposed to at the end of its service, it just continues to grow, and then we have a tumor cell. Now, there are some byproducts of bacteria that are protective against cancer, and these are the short chain fatty acids. We've discussed these in other videos, and again, I encourage you to review those if you haven't, just so you have a better understanding of how the microbiome works. Specifically, the short chain fatty acids butyrate and propionate are protective against cancer. Butyrate is the brick mason that maintains that nice brick wall or the intestinal epithelial wall and helps repair those leaky in-between spaces or tight junctions. So butyrate is really important. It also, both of these short chain fatty acids tend to turn down the pro-inflammatory immune response. And so they try to dampen down inflammation, especially when it's inappropriate. In addition, they help to make an unfavorable environment for pathogenic bacteria. And one of the ways that they do this is they push towards beta oxidation, which makes the large intestine more hypoxic, meaning there's not a lot of air there. And so only non-air breathing bacteria or anaerobic bacteria can live there. And so we want these bacteria that produce the short chain fatty acids, and we want less of the bacteria that create that specific bile acid of deoxycholic acid. So how is this happening? Well, we know that up to a third of colorectal cancers can be hereditary, but the other 2/3 are influenced by environmental factors. And the Western diet and lifestyle has played a significant role in this increase that we're seeing. And I suspect that our ultra-processed foods, or UPFs, that are eliminating our fiber from the diet and instead replacing it with food additives, emulsifiers, and sugar are likely contributing significantly. We also know that smoking, increased alcohol intake, and excessive weight or obesity do contribute to increased likelihood to develop colorectal cancer, along with being more sedentary or not very physically active. So to help prevent colorectal cancer, and again, if you're under the age of 50, please pay attention to this. My number one recommendation is to make sure you have enough dietary fiber. Fiber feeds the bacteria that produce the short chain fatty acids. We call these our probiotic bacteria. You do not have to take probiotics as a pill. Instead, you want to feed what's there and nourish what's there by providing plenty of fiber. How much fiber? 25 to 35 grams per day is the recommended amount. Only 3% of Americans are getting 25 to 35 grams per day. The other thing that fiber does is it helps you have more bowel movements and increases the bulk of your bowel movements. Having more frequent bowel movements helps eliminate toxins from the colon. Toxins, given the longer that toxins are exposed to the colon, so the longer they sit in there, the more likely they are to cause DNA damage that is going to result in colorectal cancer. So increasing fiber will increase the good bacteria that are protective, and it will help eliminate the toxins more quickly that we are all exposed to on a daily basis. The second recommendation is to move more. Exercise every chance you get. This does not mean an expensive gym membership or a pricey weight set. This means just moving. This might be a 5-minute walk, especially after you eat, or maybe it's jumping jacks or push-ups or squats at your desk for 1 minute. Anything that just gets you up and moving a little bit more. It does not have to be complicated or elaborate. We all have the ability to move more. You just have to decide that that's what you're going to do. And then the third recommendation is to get your colorectal cancer screening when it's recommended. So in the United States, we recommend that you get colorectal cancer screening for the general population starting at age 45. This can either be a colonoscopy or a stool test that you mail in. I recommend the colonoscopy because in that process, you're going to identify the polyps and the adenomas and remove them. While when you mail in the stool test, all you're doing is detecting cancer cells that already exist. So it's not going to tell you if you have polyps or adenomas that are precancerous and take care of those. It's just going to tell you, oh, you already have cancer. Now you have to go get a colonoscopy. So it's uncomfortable. A lot of people are put off by the prep. Just do it. It's a minimal amount of discomfort to prevent an unnecessary death. If this resonated or made you think of somebody that needs to hear this, please forward the video to them. Follow along for more tips. And if you would like to go into a deeper dive into microbiome health with me, you can come over to my website at katrinacoultermd.com and book a free 15-minute discovery call, and we can discuss what that would look like for you. I'll see you next time.